Well, it's Valentine's Day, and love is in the air, whether you have a girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, or any other kind of significant other, or if you're like me, who just has a best friend you deeply cherish, in this case, cherish so much I read 3 whole books to make an entire video just for her. Happy Valentine's Day to you and your special one. If you're watching this and don't have someone special in your life, hang in there. I believe you'll find someone, and happy Valentine's Day to you too. And since it's Valentine's Day, I thought I would examine Five Nights at Freddy's most infamous couple, Charlotte, Emily, and John. Charlie and John. Sure, there have been other couples in FNAF, but none had their relationship as fleshed out and expanded upon as these two. Charlie and John had 3 books worth of relationship building for us to get to know them and how their relationship ticked. Okay, I know the only reason why anyone remembers that these two exist is because of the crazy twist Charlie had at the end of the 4th closet. We are all curious of what size of a wrench that would have thrown into Charlie and John's dynamic as a couple should a 4th book had been written, but I'll get to that in good time. For now, I want to look at how John and Charlie's relationship was handled in each book. I want to discuss what was right, what went wrong, what could have been changed, and how I would have written the two being an item throughout the trilogy. I will be throwing my own opinions and hot takes into the mix, so this will not be an objective examination of the two's romance. Expect me to say things you might not agree with at times. In my opinion, Charlie and John's relationship got off to a fantastic start in the Silver Eyes, then began to sputter in the Twisted Ones, only to completely break down while simultaneously ending up in a fiery 20-car pileup on the freeway that left everyone dazed, confused, and feeling empty inside. Coincidentally, this is how I would also describe the whole novel trilogy. We have a lot to go through, so what better place to start than at the beginning with the Silver Eyes. The Silver Eyes handled Charlie and John's relationship the best. Here, they are best friends who rib each other while Charlie knows John has a crush on her. There's even a moment where Charlie speaks to John about a time he tried to kiss her under a tree when they were little kids. John and Charlie's friends know they're into each other and bug the two of them about it. The best part is their relationship doesn't take up too much of the story and goes almost unnoticed for the most part. What I like about Charlie and John's relationship the most in the Silver Eyes is that it feels completely natural. A guy and a gal who are really close friends, especially if they've grown up with each other like these two have, and start to feel some kind of romantic connection or tension, will bug each other about it. It is very common for a group of friends with 2 of them who are into each other to horse around with it. However, John and Charlie know when to be serious with each other too. My favorite part of Charlie and John's connection is when everyone is surrounded by all the animatronics. John looks over at her and says, "Charlie? Charlotte?" And she responds with, "Shh, later." This shows me that the two have such a deep connection that 1,000 words were said within John just saying her name. Charlotte completely understood what John wanted to tell her and knew he thought this was the end of everything for them. The reader understood what John and Charlie were saying in that moment so much, I wouldn't be surprised if some who read the book thought John flat out told Charlie, "I'm in love with you," instead of just saying her name twice. These two have such a great connection because of how well they know each other that it's very easy to get emotionally invested in them.
Gee, I'm sure glad they don't backpedal on that in the next book so they act like 2 isolated aliens that never interact with humans before, because that would be a shame.
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
Not everything is hunky-dory in John and Charlie's relationship. There is some awkwardness between the two. This is to be expected between 2 friends who know they want something more out of their relationship, but neither are prepared to take that next critical step. I really like how the story ends with John asking Charlotte, "So, are we ever going to see each other again?" It's a bittersweet ending that makes me really think this was supposed to be a one-off book until it became unexpectedly popular. John and Charlie are also holding hands as they are looking at 2 graves, implying that if Charlie didn't live out of town, her and John would have taken that next big step in their relationship towards a brighter future together. Again, sure glad that doesn't change in the next book just so these characters can stay friends. It's here that I need to derail my own video to talk about the time period that this novel trilogy takes place in. Now, I read the comic adaptations, so maybe the original written works touched on this more, and anyone who has read the actual books can feel free to inform me in the comments. But most of you are probably confused as to why Charlie just doesn't give John her phone number. Well, what if I told you the time period the Silver Eyes trilogy is set in connects it to the Five Nights at Freddy's movie? Oh yeah, baby, it's fan theory time. Based on the evidence I have gathered from actually paying attention while reading this trilogy, I'm not as much of an idiot as I thought I was. I determined that the novel trilogy takes place during the late 90s and even the year 2000. Again, maybe the actual books flat out state this, I doubt it, but the comics go out of their way to make the time period ambiguous. I'm pretty sure the books did their best to try and hide when they happened to make it look like they exist on a floating timeline until the end. But this doesn't make any sense. There's just too much indicating this taking place during the 90s. Think of it like Final Destination 5 and how the story hid that movie taking place during the year 1999 until the ending reveals something happening during the year 2000. Wow. Final Destination of all things to reference in a Five Nights at Freddy's video. I can't tell if the writers were inspired by or paying homage to Final Destination 5, but this was most likely just a coincidence. So anyways, these are the years that I determined each book in the trilogy to take place in. The Silver Eyes, 1998. The Twisted Ones, 1999. The Fourth Closet, 2000. If the year 2000 sounds familiar to you, that's because it's when the Five Nights at Freddy's movie is set. Wow, I pay attention to more detail than I thought. Maybe I'm not such an idiot with this franchise. I'm still an idiot with this franchise. This is not a coincidence or a reference to the Fourth Closet. Some might think I'm really stretching logic here, but based on the evidence and facts presented, I believe the movies are a continuation set within the universe of the book trilogy. The most damning evidence is the main character we follow in the first film who solves the book trilogy's biggest mystery, Mike Schmidt, or who I believe he really is, Sammy Emily. I know you want to call foul, but those of you who have read the books really think about it. During Charlie's confrontation with Baby in the Fourth Closet, Baby scolds Charlie, telling her that Sammy is all grown up and doesn't know she exists. We never find out what happened to Sam, though. Some readers don't even believe that Sammy ever existed. The only thing going against Movie Mike being Charlie's brother is that he appears to be too old. Since this could be a movie adaptation and continuation of the book universe, Sam could have simply been retconned to be Charlie's older brother instead of her twin. While not impossible, it's extremely rare for twins to be boy and girl. There are other things to tackle, like how Afton is still alive, the animatronics not being fused together, and Vanessa never being mentioned at all during the Silver Eyes trilogy. But the books got around such questions before, so I'm pretty sure the movies can too. I believe the Five Nights at Freddy's movie trilogy is Sammy's story about what happened to him, how his mother couldn't escape her ex-husband's tragedies, and how he's now getting involved with the events that happened to a sister he didn't even know existed. If I'm wrong, I'll happily declare it. But why else would there be a giant Ella doll that doubles as a springlock suit? Why would William Afton at the end of the movie yell, "I always come back!" as he's getting spring-locked, like as if it's routine for him at this point? Why does the movie end in an identical way to all the books in the trilogy? Don't be surprised if Jessica, Marla, Carlton, and John all show up in the second or third movie, even as cameos. So why did I derail my video to talk about this little theory? Well, to talk about my friend's favorite character, of course, and to say something she might be excited to hear. If I am right about the movies taking place in the Silver Eyes universe, then we're gonna get something that fans of both the puppet and Charlie have been waiting for a long time. It's no secret that the toy animatronics are in the second movie, and if Mike is back too, then the puppet, possessed by the real Charlie, might at some point tell him that Abby isn't the only sister he has. Without revealing who she is to him, she may tell Mike to go find the friends of his sister Charlie and tell them all that he's okay. We might even get a post-credits scene where Mike and Abby approach a familiar-looking group of strangers consisting of a blonde-haired woman, a pudgy lady with brown hair, a red-haired guy, and standing in front of all of them, a tall man with brown hair wearing a brown jacket. Mike nervously approaches them as he asks the brown-haired man, "Hey, are you John?" When the man says yes, Mike continues on awkwardly. This might sound crazy, but a friend of mine told me you knew a sister I had. It's weird because I didn't know I had any other sisters besides Abby. I guess this sister I never met would want you all to know that I'm doing okay. John and his friends all look nervously at each other before John looks back at Mike and cries out, "Oh my God, you're Sammy," before the screen suddenly cuts to black, giving John and the rest of Charlie's friends closure, or dragging them into the third movie to tie everything together and face off against Vanny and Peepaw in a wheelchair. Who knows at this point? Getting back on track, the point I'm getting at with the books taking place in the late 90s and possibly being prequels to the FNAF movie trilogy is that back then, while cell phones existed, they weren't common. Like, at all. Also, cell phones in the late 90s were bricks and inconvenient to carry around. Even people who owned cell phones didn't have them on their person unless it was absolutely necessary. Social apps like Skype and Discord didn't exist, and it would have been completely deflating to the story if John turned to Charlie and asked, "Do you use Discord?" John and Charlie could have used email to communicate from long distances at the time, but computers weren't a common household item, and emails were almost strictly used by businesses and not casual people. I remember being 5 years old in 1998. Yes, I know, I'm getting old. And my parents needing to use a kiosk in a government building just to send an email to them. John and Charlie's relationship was handled very maturely and felt completely natural in the Silver Eyes. It made me actually look forward to how they would progress and evolve as a couple. Well, actually, I avoided the next book like the plague for a while because someone spoiled that John and Charlie immediately started dating, and that's all the book was about. By the way, whoever said that was a liar! I'm never trusting anything my younger brother says about these books ever again. So what actually happens with these two? Well, there's only one way to find out by diving right into the Twisted Ones. Don't get spring-locked. The Twisted Ones makes the biggest mistake when writing romance and horror, having two characters starting a romantic relationship during the story. I have nothing against characters being romantic or dealing with romantic issues in a scary story. Most of the best written works in all of horror often deal with the challenges and triumphs of characters being in love and willing to go through anything for the one they're in love with. Silent Hill 2 is a story about James Sunderland trying to find, reconnect, and figure out what's going on with his wife Mary. This is considered by many to be one of the best horror stories, if not the best horror story. I know it's unfair to compare anything from Five Nights at Freddy's to Silent Hill 2, especially since both are aimed at two completely different audiences despite being in the same genre, but the difference between the relationships in Silent Hill 2 and the Twisted Ones is that James started his story already married to, well, Mary. This got a lot of unnecessary details out of the way that could be used just for flavor text, like how they met, when they started dating, when James popped the question, what led up to James arriving in Silent Hill. All of these questions could be answered during the game, if the game even bothered to answer some of these questions. Hell, the Silver Eyes even got this right by having Charlotte and John already in some kind of relationship before the book started. Sure, it wasn't a full-blown, steady, romantic relationship, but it was enough of a relationship to not have readers ask too many questions. By making the two characters start a relationship of any kind during your horror story, the writers are forced to answer a lot of unimportant questions, some they might not even be prepared for. Well, we don't have to worry about those pesky questions because John and the Sit-Up Queen's relationship isn't just reverted back to square one, we're like in square negative numbers. How? How are they worse off than in the first book? Let me break it down. So near the start of the Twisted Ones, Jessica and Charlie are talking about how Charlie's gonna meet up with John after not seeing him for a year. Jessica bugs Charlie about how they should just start going out, and Charlie starts acting all flustered like she has no idea how to speak with them. 1, I'm on Jess's side, and 2, this is a guy you've grown up around knowing all your life. It shouldn't be that hard to approach him and just start a conversation. Sure, it might be a little awkward at first because of how long you two haven't seen each other, and a lot might have happened since then, but that should give you two more to work with, not less. How is it that I'm better at approaching friends from school I haven't seen for years randomly on the street than Charlie is at approaching a guy she grew up around and held hands with at the end of the first book? As a socially awkward guy, I get that for some people meeting new faces or reconnecting might be difficult for some. However, these two were set up to have their connection evolve and start going steady the next time they met. Most of the problems with John and Charlie's writing could have been fixed if they started fully dating before the second book started. I'm not saying John and Charlie need to be the perfect happy couple, but you wouldn't have to waste the reader's time on solving the problem of getting them to start going steady in the first place. Just have the story start with Charlie and Aunt Jen getting into an argument over why she's going to college in Hurricane, which leads Charlie into being pressured to blurt out that her and John ran into each other and decided to start dating. At Jessica's place, when Jess asks Charlie if she's excited to see John again, this is where the conversation of how John and Charlie started going out happens. From there, everything that happens moving forward could eat away and challenge the couple's bond. The story already has been improved tenfold, and you could write out those awkward dates the two go on. Yeah, about those dates John and Charlie go on. The dates these two go on have been the most uncomfortable I've felt while reading a book. I don't mind if couples go on dates during a horror story and things go wrong, but I felt like a third wheel sitting beside two people who secretly hated each other, wishing I was anywhere else. First off, John is worse than me at asking a girl on a date. You never use the words date or go out when asking a girl. It makes her feel cornered and like she has no choice but to say yes most of the time. This is because she doesn't want to hurt the feelings of the guy she's gotten to know. If you really want to win the heart of a girl, always make her feel comfortable and like she has options with everything you two do together. Look, I'm not saying I'm the king of charm here, but John in the Twisted Ones is as charming as an angry spitting cobra. Still, can't blame the guy for trying. He mentioned to Charlie that he had a relationship with a girl before her, and I need to ask, how? If John botched asking out Charlie, his best friend, this bad, how did he win over the heart of a woman who was a complete stranger to him? You may not believe this, but I actually like how John is written in the Twisted Ones. Sure, he's awkward as hell when asking Charlie to dinner in a movie, but he actually tries to get his act together throughout the story. Miss, I've been doing sit-ups on the other hand. What the hell happened to Charlotte Emily in this book? She's not the same character from the Silver Eyes, and she's a horrible person. I get that she's going through a lot and constantly distracted, but I was not sympathizing with her at all through the story. Okay, I sympathized with her during the first dinner date she had with John, where the two actually managed to have a conversation between two humans and not sound like two robots. Oh, even before the movie date, Charlie lashes out at everyone she comes across. Take Artie, for example. Yes, I'll be talking about him much later. Poor guy was just trying to ask her if he could be her project partner and about her past, and she just goes off on him. Yeah, the guy was coming on a bit strong, but he backed off as soon as he suspected that she already had a boyfriend. I'm not done with Artie, but let's get back to that movie date, already in progress. Not only does Charlie talk during the movie in a theater full of other theater goers, but she starts bashing the film loudly, ruining the experience for everyone. I heavily suspect this part was rewritten and had leftovers from a previous draft in it. The movie John and Charlie are seeing already has a sequel, which makes no sense unless this was a throwback night at the cinema. Those weren't common if they happened at all in theaters in the 90s. Also, nobody heckles her for talking during the movie, which would have added some much needed comedy and put Charlotte in her place. This movie and the zombies make no sense. Excuse me, lady, but can you and your boyfriend kindly shut the hell up? Why don't you say that to my face? I've been doing sit-ups. I think this part was originally drafted as a cute little movie date at John's place where they watched an old film together on VHS. Charlie then has an epiphany of what's going on with the Springlock suits, and to cover up blurting it out to John, she criticizes the movie he put on. The writers probably changed it to the theater because they didn't want the two's relationship to look like it was progressing too fast. But it came at the cost of making Charlie the worst date to take in public places. John has to keep making excuses for the way Charlie's acting, and I get what this story was going for. Charlie is an introverted girl who doesn't get out much since the events that happened at Freddy's. She's supposed to be this awkward girl with odd hobbies that nobody can really relate to. She feels isolated with the case she's working on with Officer Burke and what she believes is happening with her twin. This, along with all the college stuff, is getting to her, so she might act out a little. However, this was not the way to go. Speaking from experience, talking with girls who keep to themselves or even label themselves as introverts are really pleasant to talk to once you get them to open up and show common interests with them. They're not these scary human wrecks who freak out on anyone who comes within 5 meters of them and look forward to ruining your day. They just want someone to talk to, and Charlie should have immediately talked with someone about all of her problems. Even if she thought John and Jessica weren't available, there's still Artie, but no, we can't have Artie being an interesting character. I'll be getting to that. The way Charlie acts goes beyond paranoid. There's a word I'm looking for, but can't quite find it. If only there was a word to describe a lady who's mean and treats everyone else like trash. Oh yeah, diva! What? Why are you all looking at me like that? What did you think I was gonna say? When the twisted animatronics finally showed up, I was like, oh thank goodness, where the hell have you been? Save me from these two who couldn't act romantic if it was their wedding day tomorrow. The final confrontation with Springtrap, the twisted animatronics, and the FNAF 1 bots is what makes Charlie and John get their acts together and realize maybe they should actually love each other. John even tells Charlie he loves her. Well, it's about damn time, ya goof. Right before she gets gobbled up by the Twisted Freddy. Hey, I know I said I didn't like the way Charlie acted in this story, but I didn't want her to die. This climax all leads into you. I'm not looking forward to talking about what happens in you. While Charlie and John's relationship is not the worst thing in the Twisted Ones, there were moments where I was genuinely rooting for the two. It was nowhere near as good as it was in the last book. In some places, I felt like it took a few steps back from what they had in the Silver Eyes. I could tell the Twisted Ones suffered from multiple drafts and leftovers from those drafts being left in the final version. John and Charlie did not become the full-on romantically involved couple like we were promised, and I have to ask, why? This was a book aimed at preteens. Even kids can handle romantic couples. Charlotte and John didn't need to have a fully physical relationship or plan to get married during this book, but it would have been nice to have them act like they weren't allergic to each other. Hold hands, put their arms around and hold each other, cuddle, or even kiss once in a while. These two never kiss once in the entire novel trilogy, and it's a damn shame. Well, Charlie's dead now, so it can't be helped. Oh wait, there she is, in her red dress, somehow grew out her hair to be waist length, and became a giant, if this panel is to be believed. Seriously, why is the art so bad throughout this comic? I wouldn't bring it into question, but the penciling was done by an Eisner Award-nominated artist, yet I've made better fan doodles that I wasn't putting any effort into. At least John isn't an idiot and knows that this isn't Charlie. Sure glad that doesn't change in the— oh, you know the drill by now. Well, it's time to address the clown in the room and take a peek into the fourth closet. I am not gonna enjoy this. I would love to tell you how Charlie and John's relationship changed in the fourth closet, but there's one problem. The Charlie we got for most of the story is an imposter. John tries to tell Jessica the Charlotte among us is a little sus, but Jess tells John that he just needs to vent before approaching her. I am not sorry for everything I just said. Since this is not a review of the books themselves, just a dive into John and Charlie's relationship, we need to do some skipping ahead. We don't get to reunite with Charlie until page 63. Okay, what the hell is going on here? How have we regressed even further? We went from relatable friends who were ready to take the next big step in their lives with each other, to a couple of awkward people unable to communicate and who go on the worst dates, to Charlie being written out of most of her own story. Also, was anyone fooled by Baby disguising herself as Charlie? It's pretty sad when even the main character isn't falling for the twist villain reveal in the book you're writing. We barely get anything out of John and Charlie's relationship, and what we do get legitimately pissed me off. When Charlie first wakes up, John is like, "I'll never let you go." And I thought, okay, so we're picking up from where we last left off? But then when Charlie confronts John about him telling her "I love you," he responds with telling her that he loves her the same way as he does all his friends. What? Are you kidding me? Go to hell, you unsympathetic prick. No, I seriously mean that. After this moment, I hated John as a character. If there's two things I don't play around with, it's love and compassion. I believe if you tell someone you love them, you better mean it and never backpedal on it. Also, why isn't Charlie reacting to this? Your best friend just took back saying he loved you. I'm not an expert on women, but if a guy tells his friend he loves her, then turns around and says, "Well, I didn't actually mean it like that," I'm sure she's gonna have a bit of a reaction. Call it a hunch. What really gets me is when Charlie and John confront Baby. She punches and then kisses John, and Charlie has no reaction to this. Why do none of the main characters react naturally to anything going on around them? No, the stupid twist reveal with Charlie doesn't explain why John barely has a reaction to shocking events. If my friend and I were confronting Baby and Baby punched me, then kissed me while disguised as her? Well, let's just say my friend wouldn't need the scooping room to tear Baby apart. Just give her a crowbar and she'd go all Gordon Freeman on that metal ass. So after the twist reveal that Charlie's been a robot the whole time and Baby rips Ella out of Charlie, wait. How was Charlie able to eat if she had a baby alive doll inside her gut the whole time? How was she able to fool doctors every time she had a checkup or x-ray done without them thinking she was pregnant? Could her and John have kids if their relationship went far enough? It's kind of hard to get pregnant if you don't have a womb. Don't blame me for asking these questions. The novel trilogy and Fourth Closet shouldn't have caused me to think of them. So while Charlie and Baby are having their showdown, John gets back up and starts heading towards them. Baby mirrors Charlie's look exactly and calls out to him while holding her hand over the real Charlie's mouth. Then Baby asks the dumbest question in the entire book. How far do you think I can get with him before he notices? Baby? I'd give John 2 seconds tops before he figured it out. All he would need to do is ask to check the other Charlie, and when you start making excuses so you don't have to, he'd figure you out immediately. Also, you act nothing like John's Charlie. Stupid. Also, if you could just mirror exactly how Charlie looked and sounded this entire time, why didn't you do that from the start? Grr, this book is so dumb! To save John from the clown girl that can be damaged with blunt force, she uses the conveniently hidden away murder bot that was implied to have killed her own father. Yes, I know this was brought up in the Silver Eyes, but why would Aunt Jen keep the thing that murdered her brother? Yeah, Aunt Jen went along with Henry's stupid plan, but that doesn't mean I don't get to call it out for what it is, or explain her keeping the murder bot. So after Charlie activates the surprise birthday kebab bot to impale them both, the last thing Charlie thinks about is how she loves John too. Really? You think John deserves your love and last thought after backpedaling on confessing his love to you? Charlie doesn't want to hate anyone as she's about to die, but the most John deserved was her hoping he'd be okay without her. This isn't a tragic romance for the ages, they barely qualify as a couple, and I'm being extremely charitable when I say that. When John finds Charlie dead and impaled on the floor, he just stands there and says, "No, no, no." That's all you have to say, John, after finding your friend who you've grown up and fell in love with dead on the ground is just, no? Did you even care about Charlie, you asshat? If I found my friend dead on the floor next to the corpse of her imposter, I would have collapsed and had a complete mental breakdown. I'd be lucky if I didn't need therapy for the rest of my life. What did they do to your character in this book? But this might not be the end of Charlie, folks, because just when you think the book couldn't get any more stupid and confusing, it somehow continues to keep getting dumber up until the very end. Yes, we now have to talk about the infamous epilogue of The Fourth Closet. This, in my opinion, ruined the entire book from any sort of saving grace it could have had, because it proved to me that the writers had no idea what they were doing and had just given up at this point. The mystery of what happened to Charlie and why there was an imposter of her had potential. Baby pretending to be Charlie had potential. Revealing that Charlotte Emily was a robot the whole time had potential. Even Charlie sacrificing herself so John could leave her and everything that had to do with Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and William Afton had potential for a fourth book to be written if the writers chose to keep going. Possibly bringing Charlie back from the dead so her and John could run off together just makes everyone ask what was the point of her dying in the first place, and so angry with the ending, on top of everything else that happened in the story, that they're no longer curious or care about what happens next with these two. I'm gonna try and figure out all the possibilities with what is going on in the epilogue. Then I will determine which outcome is the most likely based on who I think is greeting John and what the writers were going for, if they were going for anything at all. Here are the 4 possibilities I came up with. Possibility number 1. Charlie or Baby reactivated themselves Terminator 2 style, separated from the giant knife they were impaled on, and used the other to repair themselves. This Charlie then stalked John all the way to the graveyard, and at this point John is as done with everything going on in this trilogy as we are. He doesn't bother checking if this is Charlie or Baby because he doesn't care which one he takes home. Possibility number 2. John had another Charlie built from Henry's documents, so this Charlie is a clone and not the same one we've been following throughout the entire trilogy. Whoever built her could have delivered this duplicate to the graveyard earlier than expected, and that's why John looks so surprised. John is literally building a fresh start with a Charlotte Emily who doesn't remember anything except maybe her name. Possibility number 3. This Charlie greeting John at the graveyard doesn't exist, and he's just imagining what could have been. He might have lost it and is in denial about Charlie dying. So now he believes that Charlie is always with them as his mental state steadily declines. Possibility number 4. John mentioned to Charlie in the Twisted Ones that he was getting away from a girl who broke up with him. After losing Charlie, he could have called his ex-girlfriend or left a message on her answering machine explaining things. Feeling dejected and like his life is ruined, he shows up to the real Charlie's grave to vent out his grief. He is surprised to spot his ex by the tree and that she is willing to patch things up with him. John finally lets go of Charlie and all the pain Freddy has caused as he leaves to start again with his new girlfriend. I personally believe that was John's ex-girlfriend who he left the graveyard with for several reasons. First, this girl is wearing different clothes from Charlie. You could argue that Charlie's clothes got wrecked so she had to wear a new outfit, but all of the characters had a consistent wardrobe throughout each book, so changing Charlie's outfit just so she can fool the audience makes no sense. Second, her face is obscured, meaning the writers really wanted us to guess who this was. It would be pointless to hide this girl's identity if it was just Charlie. It could be Baby, but she's just a copycat Charlie at this point, and again, wouldn't make the mystery all that fun. Third, Charlie was keen on dying and staying dead, so it would be a cruel joke just to have her come back and live with the traumatizing memory of kebabbing herself. Fourth, John visited Charlotte Emily's grave, showing he had accepted his friend's death. It would feel like a punch to the face if you accepted your friend being dead, only for that same friend to show up alive and well in the graveyard shouting, "Surprise! Oh, you should see the look on your face!" The epilogue symbolizes how John has let Charlie and the tragedy of Freddy's go, and how he's now starting a new mysterious chapter in his life, but won't entirely forget his experiences with them. I don't like the epilogue to The Fourth Closet, simply because I don't think it should have been a Charlie lookalike or Charlie herself that John walked out of the graveyard with. It should have been Jessica. Now there's a spicy hot take some people won't like. Yes, John should have ended up with Jessica at the end of the trilogy if they wanted to kill off Charlie. This would have shown that both John and Jess have let go and moved on. Besides, it's not like Jessica was showing any interest in Carlton, or really doing much of anything in these books. Still, it feels like I'm forgetting someone. Somebody who could have played a much bigger role in Charlie and John's relationship. Now, what was his name again? Artie is a character I'm strangely compassionate for, simply because I understand he's a leftover from an earlier draft of the Twisted Ones. I used to think I could predict the strings being pulled in any story I was experiencing until my friend proved me dead wrong and made me realize I can't predict squat. But if there's one thing I do have a knack for, it's being able to tell when a story's been rewritten and what elements were left over from previous versions. What the writers did to Artie was a tragedy because I could tell he was meant to have a much bigger role in both the Twisted Ones and Fourth Closet. He was going to be a romantic rival to John and push him to actually confessing his love for Charlie. In this draft, John was that awkward romantic type who didn't know how to ask his friend out despite everyone in the room knowing Charlie would say yes the moment he offered. He would have been the kind of guy to dream about dating Charlie, but skirt around it when the opportunity was presented. Then comes along Artie, a guy who meets Charlie for the first time and knows nothing about her. He tries to understand her and get into her hobbies, and unlike John, asks her out on a few dates. This version of the story would have Charlie torn between John and Artie, and at some point she would be really close to going steady with Artie before John gets his act together. John still would have ended up with Charlie in this draft, but there would have been a who is she going to be with vibe throughout the story. I believe this draft got scrapped because the writers didn't want readers to actually root for Artie ending up with Charlie and risk John looking like the worst choice between the two. A sad and stupid fact about guys when it comes to the dating scene is that we're naturally competitive. If there is even a 0.01% chance that a girl a guy is interested in is talking to other men, it is mind-blowing how far that guy will go to prove he is the one for her. Competition is a good thing for people because even if you don't come out a winner, achieve your goal, or win the girl of your dreams' heart, there are two things you will always walk away with. These two things are experience and betterment of oneself, because the more you compete, the more you improve. A guy facing overwhelming odds and hurdles for even the tiniest chance of getting with the girl he's in love with also makes for a really entertaining story. Artie could have spiced up John and Charlie's relationship by giving John something to overcome other than the writer's unwillingness to let him and Charlie get serious. By removing the point of Artie's character, the writers had to make Charlie her own worst enemy and the hurdle John had to get over to be with Charlie. The Twisted Ones treat Charlie like it's her fault why the animatronics are going after her, and if she could just forget about them while she's on her dates with John, then the two could be happier together. It's a little insulting that Charlie is an obstacle in her own relationship, or sometimes is just handed to John on a silver plate like some sort of prize. In the Fourth Closet, John is looking for Charlie and is then just handed her in a literal treasure chest at Aunt Jen's. With Artie having a more proactive role in the story, the writers could have come up with more natural reasons for their relationship to fracture or nearly miss. The biggest missed opportunity for Artie was the tragic role he could have played in the Fourth Closet. He only gets a passing mention by Charlie and John as they pull up to Jen's place. When talking about Artie, John and Charlie are like, "Hey, you remember that guy who didn't really do anything in the previous book?" "There were a lot of guys who barely did anything. Be more specific." "That guy who tried hitting on you?" "Oh yeah, what about him?" "Were you two dating?" "No, he was barely a character." "Well, so am I in this book, but you're still interested in me." "That's because I'm written to like you." And that's all that's mentioned of him. The Fourth Closet could have started with Jessica checking in on John after losing his job and give the bad news that Charlie hooked up with Artie after John stopped communicating with her. Shortly after, Artie disappears, giving John more incentive to investigate the fake Charlie, what happened to the real Charlie, and where Artie disappeared off to. When confronting the devil in a red dress, she would of course tell John that her and Artie broke up because he wasn't John and Artie just ran off because he couldn't handle it. After John finds the real Charlie and they confront Baby, she could have revealed to them that she manipulated Artie's feelings for Charlie to get info out of him. Once he outlived his usefulness, she murdered him to make herself available to John again. Charlie and John could have found Artie's corpse, making Charlie realize her father's past with William Afton is no longer just affecting her and those she cares about, but anyone who even tries to associate with her. Artie's death could have made Charlie's decision to delete her own save file more understandable because she could have believed that if she didn't exist, Artie would still be alive and John would have led a happier life. You know, give actual impact to the tragic end of their relationship instead of having it come out of the blue. It's really easy to judge character relationships with the advantage of hindsight. It's really easy to judge anyone's relationship, real or fiction, with the advantage of hindsight. I was also reading the comic adaptations, which can't go into as much detail about things as the actual written novels. When reading the Silver Eyes comic, I thought Marla was Jason's mom until others helpfully pointed out that she's Jason's half-sister. Then again, Marla goes from looking like Jason's mom in the Silver Eyes to looking like Charlie at the end of the Twisted Ones to looking like the youngest member of Charlie's friends in the Fourth Closet. She somehow gets younger with each passing book. Anyone in any kind of relationship can have flaws pointed out to them and how they could have done better. My relationships with people I care about aren't flawless because I'm a very flawed person, and you can point out over a dozen mistakes I've made interacting with my family and friends. The difference is that you have the power to write however you want the fictional relationship to go, good or bad. Something I also want to point out is that adaptations should stand on their own. Maybe some of the things I've criticized about Charlie and John's relationship is the fault of the comics. Maybe John had a better reaction to Charlie's death in the Fourth Closet novel. However, when I promised my friend I would read these books for her, I made sure it was okay if I just read the comics. She said it was fine because the comics are really close to the books and that I would be getting the same story. Anyone watching this video is still welcome to point out any criticisms I have with John and Charlie's relationship they don't like, or things left out from the book. When singling out and picking apart one element of a story, it's easy to forget the other elements at play. When judging their relationship in the Twisted Ones, it's easy to forget that Charlie is going through both college and multiple murder cases, and that John is dealing with a breakup and a construction job. When judging the two's relationship in the Fourth Closet, it's easy to forget that John had lost his job at the beginning of the story and is in the middle of looking for another one, and that Charlie is recovering from being kidnapped by Twisted Freddy, somehow being found by Aunt Jen, and locked in a treasure chest for most of the story. Hey, how did Aunt Jen find Charlie and pry her out of Twisted Freddy without puncturing her into scrap metal? The problem with the other story elements around Charlie and John's quote-unquote romance in the Twisted Ones and Fourth Closet is that they're not all that good. I will admit I liked the Twisted Ones enough to think it was passable, but I was not rooting for John and Charlie's romance by the end, and no, it was not because Charlie looked like she died. The Fourth Closet was just a mess. I have nothing else to say about the Fourth Closet, but it was a mess. My favorite part of that book had nothing, and I mean nothing, to do with Charlie and John, so it couldn't aid in their relationship subplot. When the surrounding elements aren't all that good, it makes the romance look even worse. So, am I judging John and Charlie's relationship too harshly? No, I don't think so, because I'd like to ask the question, what romantic relationship is there to judge? The closest they get is just wrapping their arms around each other awkwardly. A few dates, touching hands, and John taking back saying he loved Charlie, no, I'm not letting that go, does not make them qualify as a romantic couple. The Silver Eyes trilogy is not against characters kissing. Circus Baby plants one on John while confronting her. So why doesn't the real Charlie share a kiss with him? These two share little to no affection during their time together, despite being written as only having eyes for each other. I'm also confused about how close the relationship these two have is supposed to be. In the Fourth Closet, when Charlie first wakes up, John wraps his arms around her and tells her, "I won't ever let you go again. If I tried this on my friend, it wouldn't matter if she was missing for a while. She would react with, 'Oh, what the hell are you saying? You're making this weird.'" I guess these two have such a deep connection as friends that they can sometimes put their hands on each other in ways that would look completely inappropriate in a non-committal relationship. This could have worked if John said to Charlie, "I'm never letting you out of my sight again." I get what the writers were going for. They wanted to have the will they won't they tension throughout the entire trilogy. But they also wanted readers to know these two were meant for each other, but they also wanted to have a tragic romance. You can't write a couple like this. You either have them stay as friends and keep the audience guessing if they'll end up together, or you have them become romantically involved and face the new challenges and benefits of their deeper relationship. This trilogy was written for a younger audience, so I get that they didn't want things to get too far in Charlie and John's relationship. As my friend would put it, the writers wouldn't want to imply Charlie and John doing saucy things together. Then why have Charlie be 18, then 19? Why include hot imposter Charlie? Why make Circus Baby look like this? Why have Baby ask Charlie, "How far do you think I'll get with him before he notices?" What did you think she meant with that question? John and Charlie's relationship is all over the place, even without the rest of the elements from the Twisted Ones and Fourth Closet, and that's why I don't think I'm judging it too harshly. Okay. Now that I'm done ranting and rambling about the sinking ship that is John and Charlie's so-called romance, I'm going to try and fix, in the strongest air quotes possible, writing their relationship into something that stands on its own and complements the books they're a part of. I guarantee not everyone will like my interpretation of these two's interactions, but at least we'll all agree that I'm actually trying to write a romance story with Charlie and John. The Silver Eyes. I actually wouldn't change anything with their relationship in this book. It would mostly go unchanged from the release we got. There would be little changes with other things in the Silver Eyes, but this video isn't about rewriting the entire books. John and Charlie's relationship, in my opinion, is nearly perfect in the Silver Eyes. Moving on. The Twisted Ones. Charlie and John would already be a romantic couple before the Twisted Ones started. At the beginning of the story, Aunt Jen and Charlie get into a fight over why Charlie wants to go to college in Hurricane of all places, where she faced the horrors of Freddy's. During the argument, Charlie blurts out that her and John got together and she wants to be close to her boyfriend while in school. Aunt Jen warns Charlie to not do anything dumb with John or make any mistakes while with him, which would cause Charlie to fiercely speed off in her car before her aunt had a chance to finish. At Jessica's home, Charlie and Jess talk about how Charlie met up with John outside of Hurricane, and he asked her out right there. While the girls talk, John rings the front door, causing him and Charlie to kiss right in front of Jessica. Jess is shocked that Charlie and John are just willing to lock lips out in the open like that. Everything seems to be going fantastically for Charlie until she runs into Officer Burke, who informs her murders similar to Afton's Springlock incident are popping up. He makes Charlie take a vow of silence before working on the case with him in order to not cause a panic within Hurricane. Things start fracturing for Charlie as she now has to deal with college and solving a murder case. She begins clamming up around John and being late for their dates. When John tries to cuddle with Charlie and hold her, she doesn't return the sentiments. Sometimes Charlie gets a break from the case, but when she tries to spend time with John, he's too tired from work and being frustrated with how she's acting. Charlie feels like her life and relationship is falling apart, but there's someone other than Jessica she believes she can confide in, her classmate and project partner Artie, who isn't all that knowledgeable with technology and computers. Charlie uses this to her advantage to vent her frustrations with the case without actually telling him. However, Artie is a charming guy who tries to understand Charlie, her hobbies, and be there for her. She doesn't notice it at first, but Charlie starts to feel conflicted about John and Artie. Artie doesn't try to invade her and John's relationship, but he seems to be there for her when John isn't. While Charlie doesn't fall for Artie, she and him get closer as the book progresses. John gets suspicious of Charlie spending more time away from him, bottling up and shrugging off his acts of affection. When he finds out that Charlie's study partner is Artie, John acts obnoxious with him and asks Artie really awkward questions like, "So, what do you two study together? And what do you both of you get up to after studying?" Charlie and Artie try to explain to John that after working on their projects, they both go their separate ways and all they do is study, work on projects, and talk. John isn't having any of it, which causes Artie to defend Charlie from him and make the situation tensely silent for everyone. Artie slinks away as John and Charlie are left there to confront each other. The two have their first argument as a couple, where out of anger, both of them suggest at the same time that they don't look at each other for a few days. When Charlie arrives back at Jessica's place, she is crying as Jess comforts her, and John is at home feeling absolutely depressed about how he treated her. Charlie tells Artie about what happened with her and John the next time they work together, and this is when Artie starts advancing on her. It starts out innocently, just putting his hand on her arm while they study. Then, over the next couple of days, he gets more invasive as he rubs her shoulder, then back with his free hand. Eventually, he starts putting his arm around her. Charlie feels a little uncomfortable with what Artie's doing, but at the same time, she can't tell him to stop because it's the only time in her life she feels secure. After 3 days without John, Charlie heads off to confront him again at his place. There, John tells Charlie that he hasn't been treating her right and maybe it would be best they split up. Charlie breaks down, crying out that she would never want to leave him and that she just hasn't told him everything going on with her. John sits down on the floor with Charlie in the middle of his living room as she breaks her oath of silence and tells him everything going on with the multiple murder case. John exclaims that everything makes sense now and the twisted animatronics must be affecting the construction sites he works at. They cuddle each other on the floor as they both wipe away each other's tears before sharing a passionate kiss. At their next study session, Charlie excitedly tells Artie about her and John reconnecting. Artie tries his best to sound supportive, but he is understandably less than thrilled to hear that. Still believing that her and John's relationship is at the end of their rope, Artie tries telling Charlie she and him will just have another relationship-ending argument. He then tries to tell her that there's always a better guy out there for her as he puts his hand on the side of her face. This gets Charlie super pissed off as she punches Artie across the face hard enough to make him fall backwards onto the floor. She walks away angrily and tells Artie John was right about him as Artie lies there rubbing his jaw, completely baffled. That's the last we see of Artie in the Twisted Ones. Much later in the book, before everyone searches for the hideout of the twisted animatronics, Charlie pulls Jessica aside to talk with her alone in a room. We don't see their conversation, but when they both leave the room, Jessica is looking down and uncomfortable. Whatever Charlie told her, she clearly didn't want to hear. In my version of the Twisted Ones, instead of Charlotte Emily feeling some kind of connection and drive to her twin brother Sammy, the story would only focus on Charlie slowly realizing the animatronics are only after her. At the end of the story, Charlie is willing to sacrifice herself, allowing her friends to escape and end the nightmare of Freddy's once and for all in Hurricane. John pulls her aside and embraces her as tightly as he can, telling Charlie he loves her too much to watch her die. He reassures her they will both make it out together before sharing another kiss. However, as they're about to escape, the Twisted Freddy appears out of the ground and is about to devour everybody when Charlie pushes John into Jessica and Officer Burke as hard as she can. They all tumble towards the exit as Charlie is engulfed by the demented robot. Both Officer Burke and Jessica have to drag John out as he's screaming about how they need to go back and save Charlie. In the epilogue, while everyone at the restaurant is talking about what happened to Charlie in Springtrap, Charlie's car pulls up to the parking lot. Out of the car steps Charlie, looking like she did before, but now sporting bandages over random parts of her body and walking with a limp. Everyone, especially John, runs up to Charlie and hugs her with tears in their eyes. As her friends and boyfriend hug her, Charlie smiles a dark, devilish grin nobody else can see as she reassures her friends, "Everything's going to be okay now." The Fourth Closet. Be warned, my version of The Fourth Closet is almost unrecognizable from the book we all got. The story starts a year after the Twisted Ones. John and Charlie now live together, sharing a house, room, bank account, and all that other boring adult stuff. Charlie has grown her hair out to waist length and wears makeup and fancier clothes when she goes out in public. She has a high-paying job with a budding new tech insider company while John still works construction. John is really happy with how his life has turned out and sharing everything with the girl of his dreams. In fact, he's so happy he's been thinking about taking the next big step with Charlie as he looks at a tiny jewelry box containing a diamond ring whenever she's not around. However, Charlie starts acting weird and going out at night when a new pizzeria called Circus Baby's Pizza opens. It has animatronics similar to Freddy's, and John believes Charlie is investigating this new restaurant. When John confronts Charlie about it, she guiltily admits to him that she is indeed searching the place for any connections to William Afton. She doesn't feel comfortable with that restaurant being open and all the children it's drawing in. John strikes a deal with Charlie that he will help her with the investigation, but if they can't find anything, Charlie will never go near that pizzeria again and return to their normal lives. Sometime later, John bumps into Artie, who he at first is apprehensive with. Artie just wants to apologize to John about advancing on Charlie and see if him and John could patch things up. He congratulates John on his progress with Charlie, and John is surprised to hear Artie is still single when he admits he hopes to score a girl like Charlotte someday. John tells Artie that Jessica is available, and Artie exclaims that he's not going to make the mistake of trying to swipe any girls who know him again. John reminds Artie that he's okay with him trying Jessica, but Artie jokes that blondes aren't really his style, and that going after her would break some dumb bro code they should have. This gets a chuckle out of both of them as the two start becoming friends. Way later in the story, both Officer Burke and Artie approach John, as Artie apologizes to John immediately and awkwardly for spying on his girl at night. John is shocked to hear this until Artie explains that Officer Burke forced him to do this behind his back as they show him photographs they took. Officer Burke points out that up close, photos of Charlie look fine, but take a picture only 10 or more feet away and she starts to look unfocused and blurry. It's strange because everything else in those photographs that are further away are in focus and just fine. John is convinced it's just the cameras, but Artie and Officer Burke tell Artie she also looks this way from a certain distance without cameras. Officer Burke then reveals to John that Charlie isn't investigating anything when he's not around. In fact, she's the one approaching children and encouraging them to visit Circus Baby's Pizza. Now John is the one bottling up around Charlie and trying to figure out if what Officer Burke told him is true. Charlie notices John's behavior and strangely suggests that they stop looking into the pizzeria. John is suspicious of this because the Charlie he knows would never stop investigating something until she figured out what's going on. Charlie tries convincing John that she couldn't find anything wrong and that this whole case is taking too much of a toll on both of them. John plays along, making Charlie promise to not leave at night anymore, and for the first 2 nights, she actually doesn't and wakes up with him each morning. One night, John has a nightmare about Charlie, and it starts with the Twisted Freddy approaching him. It opens up its chest cavity before spitting out Charlie, who is all cut up and limping. She looks the same as she did in the Twisted ones, and John catches her before she falls to the ground as she cries to him, "It hurts, John. It all hurts." John replies that of course she hurts and needs treatment. Charlie weeps. "It's not the cuts, John. Everything hurts." John tries asking her what she means by everything, and she replies while sounding out of breath and gasping with, "It's using me. It's not me. I'm not me." Charlie collapses in John's arms before he notices something moving beneath her skin. Her skin then rips open with no blood as 4 tiny Twisted Freddys in the same style as Nightmare Freddy's Freddles jump out and attack John. He wakes up from the nightmare, immediately sitting up with a yell. He feels around before noticing Charlie's side of the bed is empty in the middle of the night. John knows where Charlie is headed off to and finds her at Circus Baby's Pizza. There he discovers that Charlie somehow can enter the pizzeria after it's closed. After Charlie leaves the pizzeria and John realizes she's heading home, he has to race her there without being detected. He narrowly reaches their house first and sneaks in through the back door. John fakes using the washroom, but Charlie is still suspicious of why he's up so early. He tells her the half-truth of having a nightmare and not being able to fall back to sleep. When he presses her on what she was doing out of the house so late, Charlie makes up the flimsy excuse that she was craving a late-night snack they didn't have in the house. She even shows John a freshly sealed bag of some sort of treat and offers some to John. He refuses and heads back to bed, lying awake and trying to figure out just what is going on with Charlie. Near the end of the book, John engages a plan with Jessica, Artie, Carlton, and Marla to break into Circus Baby's Pizza and figure out what's happening in that place and why Charlie is associated with it. During this showdown, John and Artie confront Charlie, who is standing right beside Springtrap. Charlie lays bombshell after bombshell on John as she reveals that the tech insider company she works for never existed and it was a newly rebranded Fazbear Entertainment all along. They funded Circus Baby's Pizza to perform experiments on children, and she's the owner of the establishment. This Fazbear Entertainment seized both Henry and William's technology, including Springtrap himself, and allowed Charlie to work on them. John asks Charlie why she would work with such a horrible company and keep Springtrap around before he realizes what his dream was trying to tell him. John asks this Charlie who she really is and demands to know what happened to his girlfriend. With the most evil smile on her face, this Charlie asks John something that drains all color on his face and sickens him. She asks if John has seen the scooping room while searching the place, and that it's where she took his Charlie before starting to play pretend. The imposter tells John, "If there's one thing I know how to do, it's how to play pretend." John yells, "No more games! Just show him what happened to Charlie." "Why, John, you've been looking at Charlie the whole time, dummy." The imposter turns off the hologram surrounding her to reveal the real Charlie's taxidermied corpse, a sickly purple color filled with wires that are sticking out of random areas. There are 2 different colored animatronic eyes in her sockets and rows of sharp, needle-thin metallic teeth in her mouth. A huge hole revealing the wired endoskeleton underneath is in her gut. Artie is shocked silent as John collapses to the floor, screaming as too many emotions he can't handle are going through him in that instant. All he asks is why this happened to Charlie and what the hell has this monster turned her into. The mechanical nightmare reveals to John that she used to be Circus Baby, but now another animatronic named Ballora is in there with her too, so she's not entirely sure what to call herself. The reason why everything happened to Charlotte as it did is because she was never Henry's daughter. She was a daughter of William Afton, and Henry kidnapped her as an infant to prevent William from raising Charlie into another psycho. Henry sacrificed himself to save Sammy from being murdered and Charlie taken back by her father when they were toddlers. After Henry's death, his widow blamed Charlie and moved away with Sammy. His sister, Aunt Jen, was left to pick up the pieces and raise Charlie in his place. Baby was built to replace Charlie and carry on Afton's work should anything happen to him. But one of his other daughters, Elizabeth, got jealous and kept on trying to sabotage the robot. When Elizabeth was murdered by Funtime Freddy, yeah, I changed which animatronic killed Elizabeth for obvious reasons I won't explain. William Afton halted work on Baby and the other Funtimes for over a decade until Charlie and her friends returned to Hurricane. After Afton died, a timer he normally would reset every day ticked down to 0 and activated all the Funtime animatronics. Baby immediately got to work, setting up the plan with the twisted ones that lured Charlie right to her. Charlie obviously didn't believe William Afton was her father and refused to carry on his work, so Baby thought the best way to make Charlie obey her father was if she became her. That's when Charlie was brought into the scooping room, hollowed out, and had Baby crawl inside her. Baby also had Ballora join her so she could act more mature and convincing. The Nightmare Charlie turns the hologram back on and offers her hand to John, asking him to be part of her family. They did so well together before. Springtrap can be the father figure and the rest of the Funtimes can be their children. Together they can be one big happy family and John would never have to be away from Charlie again. John furiously yells at this thing that she is not Charlie, just a jealous wind-up toy wearing her skin. He declines the offer by battling her in Springtrap with Artie. John takes on the Pretender while Artie handles Springtrap. With the help of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Golden Freddy, John and Artie manage to decommission Springtrap and trick the abomination wearing Charlie's skin into the scooping room so it could be scooped out of Charlie's body. Thinking the coast is clear, John tearfully crawls to Charlie's body and holds what's left of her as Artie has a moment of silence for them. John apologizes to Charlie for not being there when she needed him the most and takes the ring out of his pocket. As he slips it on her finger, he tells her, crying, "Somehow I know you would have said yes, and that I was insane for wanting to marry you." As John tries to laugh through his tears, Artie places a comforting hand on his shoulder, telling him he's sure John was the greatest guy Charlie could have asked for. Right after Artie tries to comfort John, the thing from inside Charlie's body is suddenly back and attacks them again. It's now sporting a clown mask, has no legs, and is just a mess of wires with 2 arms, only roaring mechanical screams at both of them. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Golden Freddy all make short work of this thing as John, Artie, Jessica, Marla, and Carlton all escape with Charlie's body. Circus Baby's Pizza and the underground facility below it all collapse and cave in behind them. During the epilogue, while John is chatting with friends and family and receiving condolences at Charlie's funeral, Jessica approaches him. Jess says to John that she needs to tell him something important, but when John asks what it is, she nervously looks away before saying forget it and now's not the right time. After Jessica walks away, Aunt Jen talks with him. Yes, Aunt Jen survives in my version of the Silver Eyes trilogy, and John asks her if Charlie really was William Afton's daughter. Aunt Jen hesitates to answer at first, before sadly admitting yes she was. She tells John that it's funny how when she first started raising Charlie, she thought she could magically eliminate all of Charlie's Afton traits by raising her the best she could into a proper young woman. When Charlotte started showing interest in technology, building animatronics, and her behavior began to get aggressive, Aunt Jen wondered where she went wrong. It was only when Charlie was becoming an adult that Jen realized she raised Charlie into a fine lady. Aunt Jen leaves John with the reassurance that despite being an Afton, Charlie would have been a great wife for him. A year or so after Charlie's funeral, John is at Charlie's grave talking to her tombstone when he spots Jessica by a tree. She approaches John and finally tells him what was so important at the funeral. The story flashes back to the part in the Twisted Ones where Charlie talks to Jess alone in a room. Now the conversation between them is shown as Charlie asks Jessica to promise her something. Jess at first happily tells Charlie that she'll promise her anything before Charlie tells her what the promise is. Charlie asks Jessica that should anything happen to her to make sure John is happy. Jessica tries backing out by telling Charlie she won't promise to steal her man, but Charlie explains the very real possibility she could die since she's the one being targeted. All she wants is for John to be able to continue on if that happens, and Jess begrudgingly makes the promise. John is unwilling to accept Jessica's offer, saying he wouldn't betray Charlie's memory like that and that he doesn't deserve to be with anyone after allowing her to die so gruesomely. Jessica completely understands John, but reminds him this is what Charlie wanted and he needs to stop beating himself up for something that was out of his control. Charlie wouldn't want him living the rest of his days in pain and move on from everything that happened. Jess informs John that not only could he live a life without pain and help keep her promise to Charlie, but that it would also put her at peace since Jessica admits she couldn't stop thinking about John since the funeral. Jess offers a shaking and nervous hand to John while trying to give her kindest, warmest smile. John hesitates at first before slowly taking Jessica's hand, and the two walk out of the graveyard together, holding hands as Charlie Tombstone reads, "Rest in peace, Charlotte Emily, 1980 to 1999. Loving daughter, friend, companion, and fiancé." The epilogue ends with a view of an end table with framed pictures on it. The first framed picture shows John and Jessica on their wedding day at the altar. The next shows Jessica in a hospital bed with John standing next to her as she's holding their newborn baby. The third is a family photo of a slightly older John, Jessica, and their two kids who look to be around 10 or 11 years old. The last photo is of Charlie, who someone wrote the message, "Miss you always, Aunt Charlie," on it with permanent marker. Now I want to make a few things very clear. First off, changing the twist from Charlie being a robot to an Afton was not my idea. My friend came up with that as a joke initially, before I thought to myself how that twist would have worked so much better even if it was predictable. To me, a twist only works if you can go over a story and see the pieces being put into place so it was properly built up. Technically, I still used the Charlie is a robot twist too, since Ennard hid itself inside Charlie's skin to fool John and everyone else around it. Secondly, I only rewrote the parts of the Twisted Ones and Fourth Closet that had to do with John and Charlie's relationship. I felt like at times I was rewriting the entire books, but there were definitely parts left out. Lastly, if I were writing the Silver Eyes books at the time, I highly doubt I'd be aware of Security Breach and Ruin's development. Actually, Steel Wool didn't even have the license at the time Fourth Closet was written. However, as soon as I became aware of Security Breach and later Ruin, I would have immediately asked Scott Cawthon permission to write 2 more Silver Eyes books that were very loose adaptations of those 2 games. I'd most likely have to retcon Jessica and John's children to be Gregory and Cassie. Gregory would have been John and Jess's natural born son, while Cassie would have been adopted. Actually, Cassie being Gregory's sister would have been a better explanation for why she risked life and limb for him in the ruined Pizzaplex than what we got in the final game. I'm just writing fanfiction at this point. I better stop. So, do I think of Charlie and John as the worst written couple I've ever seen? Oh, not by a long shot. Empress Teresa holds that title because the main couple in that book makes Charlie and John Shakespearean by comparison. That should scare you, given everything I've said about John and Charlie in this video. I do believe that Charlie and John are the worst couple in all of Five Nights at Freddy's. Granted, I haven't read every single book in this franchise. I'm pretty sure at least a couple of the Fazbear Frights or Tales from the Pizzaplex books deal with couples. However, Charlie and John are the go-to couple when thinking of FNAF and romance, when you're not shipping characters together. They were supposed to be this tragic romance, best friends who were ready to take the next step in their lives until the girl was tragically taken away from the guy. I understand what the writers were going for, but the execution completely missed the mark. This shouldn't be the end for Charlie and John, since an adaptation of the Silver Eyes trilogy is always on the table. Whether the adaptation is a miniseries or a game like Into the Pit, there's always an opportunity for writers to correct what went wrong. Could you imagine a pixel-style game like Into the Pit where your decisions determined the outcome of John and Charlie's relationship, and which of the several creative twists, including new and joke twists, you got throughout the story? I could imagine a joke ending where it's revealed both Charlie and John have been robots who were never programmed to love the entire time. How about a joke ending that reveals Funtime Chica was operating everything from a control panel and the main characters walk in on her? Something like what happened in the dog ending of Silent Hill 2. I want to leave off the video with a message to my friend who I hope made it this far. If you're wondering why I would read 3 books I previously had no interest in and then make a video over an hour long analyzing 2 characters in them just for you, it's because you're worth all that effort I made. We met when I had less than 20 subscribers, and when I invited you to my first live stream way later, it was a pleasant surprise when you actually showed up and brought others with you so we could all have a great time. You also met my family friend Harley Bender before he passed away on one of my streams. Since then, our relationship has only gotten closer, and I enjoy all the time we spend and talk together on and outside of YouTube. I've discovered that you have many of the same interests I do, and you've gotten me interested in other things I otherwise would never have tried. Most importantly, you've encouraged me to keep going with all of my projects I've told you about and my channel when it was just starting, and even when I'm at my lowest points. I don't think my channel will ever reach the same heights as yours, but if there's one thing you showed me I have, it's determination. People told me before I would never befriend a girl as talented and amazing as you, and I have since proven them wrong with that. Maybe I can prove myself wrong and achieve greatness with the stuff I'm working on. But no matter what happens, I hope that we continue to grow closer, and that I can keep proving that I have what it takes to be friends with you, since you're an extraordinary lady who only comes around once in a lifetime. Also, you're way better looking than the so-called hot Charlie imposter. Just saying. Thank you all for watching, and happy Valentine's Day to everyone.